Speaking in the National Assembly budget sitting on 19 December 2022, Government Minister Dr. Clarke had severe criticisms of the previous Team Unity administration as she pointed to what she considered failures and abuses. According to Minister Clarke, the government had no formal development plan, broke government's own procurement rules, and lied to the people about the financial status of the country, and pointed an accusing finger at the parliamentary opposition, former members of the Team Unity administration.
What happened in the past 7 years? And finally, and unfortunately, PSs and directors failing their ethical and professional mandate to serve the people. Oh, what we met part 4. Madam Speaker, the rise of the CBI program and the death of policy. This administration, that administration, for the past 7 years, oversaw the transition of the government revenue, supported by about 10% when Dr. Douglas was Prime Minister, to nearly 60% of the government's budget. Now, for an accountant as a former Prime Minister, that's not just a nightmare, that is an economic crisis. How could you fool the good people of St. Kitts and Nevis for 7 years? Surplus, 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 right? Surplus. Surplus, surplus, surplus. And nothing to all go so. There has not been one new thing from the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action, and Constituency Empowerment, and I wonder if Foreign Affairs, but the Minister of Foreign Affairs will speak to it, in 7 years. This ministry, Ministry of Sustainable Development, which was mismanaged by the former Prime Minister, deals with economic development, economic planning, and public sector investment. And I do not have one new thing to present from the administration for the past 7 years. It's important that I explain why this presentation will speak to stewardship and leadership. This is a philosophy of leadership from the past administration. If we met 10 problems, and we did, the member opposite can't even tell you of 9 of the problems. The government was shrouded in secrecy. Leadership was a solo engagement with no consultation, not of the government and not of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and surely not of the opposition, because anything we said was a problem. Civil servants were paid 5 to 7 years to stay home. How is that prudent fiscal management? How is that putting people first? And I know for the past 3 days we've had a budget presentation of smiles and pleasantries, but I think the members opposite have an ethical and professional responsibility. They're culpable, because pleasantries and smiles will not absolve the members opposite from their failure to protect the government from corrupt leadership of the former administration. All members in the opposition are culpable. They are all guilty. They allowed a leader to lie about surpluses, to lie while he was running our government's budget into a deficit. That is tantamount to theft. Theft of the citizenry. Theft of our freedoms. We couldn't comment on anything in St. Kitts and Nevis. Theft of our rights to employment. Instead of empowering people, we kept them on welfare programs. Theft of our liberties in COVID-19. And theft of our ability to make a sustainable living. I pause here when I reflect on theft of our liberties and a government that would support young women being put in jail for 3 days because they held a piece of paper. I can't let it go. I cannot, a mother of two, in prison, jail, whatever it is, on the bench, 3 days, because she felt it was important to say to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, the restrictions are excessive. And that government supported the former Prime Minister, a failed leader, for 7 years. I think some people owe the federal government some money for 7 years of 2 salaries. I think it's only fair that some people pay back the federal government. But anyways, what we didn't meet, Madam Speaker, right? I thank you for finally recognizing. But should I thank you when you allowed yourself to be fired? I think you should have resigned and walk over to the opposition side. Shouldn't you have resigned and walk over to the opposition side? What we didn't meet, Madam Speaker, we didn't meet a national development plan since 2017. Madam Speaker, I asked the PS, the current PS, to messenger down this book, and we all know this book. The Adaptation Strategy in Response to the New EU Sugar Regime, 2006 to 2013. And when the former Prime Minister and Minister of Sustainable Development took office, they extended this until 2017. And from 2017 to 2022, there has been no national development policy guiding the country. We just do whatever we feel like doing, governing on a whim. Dr. Denzil Douglas-led administration did this so the people of St. Kitts and Nevis could transition from sugar to tourism. They did nothing else. Nothing else. But I'll allow the Minister of Economic Development to speak to that failure. There was no new initiative for sustainability, no response mechanism for climate resilience despite the experience of Hurricane Maria, no master planning agenda for national land allocation, no data to drive policy implementation. You know how long we've been asking for the survey of living conditions? No stewardship of the country. And it's important as a leader that you recognize that you are a steward. You do not own St. Kitts and Nevis, and you certainly do not own the people. But that is the governance we had in that ministry. What will we implement? We are going to work on a system of equity to resources, data for decision making, and we will complete the survey of living conditions, the census, and the sectoral surveys. Greater involvement of civil society, private sector, and our environmental stewards, and innovation and digitization. What has the ministry done? I'm going to review the projects we've implemented in the last 3 months, 3 months versus 7 years, the projects to be implemented in the coming year, and projects for our medium to long.
According to Dr. Clarke, there will be greater involvement of civil society as well as digitalization and the completion of the survey of living conditions. Glenn Bart reporting for SK Newsline.